This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Mathews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I am very excited for today's guest. Today's guest is the author of the book Next Level Nonprofit, a nonprofit system that shows you how to implement a proven organizational operating system to build the team and increase your lasting impact. His organization has invested more than $51 million into Detroit neighborhoods, renovated 4 school buildings, mobilized more than 82,000 volunteers, and beautified over 2,300 city blocks in Detroit. Founder and CEO of Remodeled, Chris Lambert. Welcome.
Yes, so good to be with you here today, bro.
Dude, the coolest thing I get to do, I look forward to every week, is introducing guests. Like, that is such an inspiring introduction.
Because it's all downhill from here,
or all straight
okay.
up.
All right, let's go.
But I have to ask. I start every podcast with this question. Life Remodeled, you've grown this to a successful $3.1 million venture. You're currently in the middle of a $14.7 million capital campaign. You have a headcount of 17 people. You've been an entrepreneur for 16 years. What's the most important lesson you've learned throughout this entire process?
The lesson that sticks out to me the most that I learned through the School of Hard Knocks is how incredibly important it is to get the right people in the right seats, and not just top tier talent, but to truly become a team of one. And for so many years in the early stages as an entrepreneur, I didn't understand that value. And because of that, we ended up burning through a lot of people. Sometimes it was because we hired the wrong people for the wrong seats. Other times it was because I truly didn't know how to develop people if they weren't already rock stars in their own right. And certainly had no idea how to help everybody truly become a team of one. And it wasn't until we were hitting our heads against the walls, realizing that we weren't achieving the level of impact we knew we were capable of, that I finally realized how important it was to build a team that was going to go through for the long haul and to attract, retain, and develop the absolute best people possible.
So I have to recap your intro, because I think what you just shared with us, 51 million in Detroit neighborhoods, 4 school buildings, mobilized 82,000 plus volunteers. It's hard for me to get my kid out of bed in the morning. Can't even fathom 82,000 people. So I'm really excited to unpack that. And then 2,300 city blocks. But I want to go back in time, right? Because, to me, having this opportunity to spend time with you, it's amazing, because I'm so curious around the nonprofit world. I think as an entrepreneur, a lot of people enter entrepreneurship to make money and build a widget and do all these different things. And I'm just curious around how your path led you to, becoming an entrepreneur in the nonprofit space.
Sure. So I was born and raised in a very small town in northern Indiana. And when I say small town, I mean, we didn't have a 4-way stoplight until I was in middle school. So the words urban neighborhood revitalization were 3 words I never heard in succession my entire upbringing. My story involves a lot of spirituality. Basically, my parents would take my sister and I to church service about once a month because they felt like it was the right thing to do. But I can't recall them ever talking about God in the home for whatever reason. And I don't know why this was. I was this really passionate kid spiritually. In particular, I loved the person of Jesus, so much so that in 8th grade, other kids in school called me Lambert, the Jesus freak, because I was the kid who was trying to lead everybody to Christianity. I wasn't very successful at it. And then shortly before I turned 16, I hit a growth spurt. It didn't last as long as I hoped. I'm only 6 feet tall, but I did become kind of a big fish in a small pond when it came to athletics. My high school was fairly large because 3 little cities went to the same high school. But I started looking around at my buddies who were not following God, and I realized they were having a lot more fun in life than me and my little church youth group. So I said, goodbye, Jesus. Actually, a more authentic way to put it was I gave Jesus the middle finger and said, I want nothing to do with you. And for the next 6 years of my life, from the ages of 16 to 22, I basically did whatever I wanted to do, whatever I thought was going to make me the most happy. And at that time, what were my values? My values were sports, girls, and parties, good times, drugs, alcohol, friends, you name it. So when I went to Indiana University and studied business, my first agenda item was to join a fraternity. And I joined what was at the time the largest fraternity on the campus, which eventually got kicked off for guns and cocaine. Interesting story there. We won't get into now. But I was living the life that I thought I wanted to live and doing the things I thought I wanted to do. But every now and then I'd be in bed late at night thinking to myself, like, man, this really isn't doing for me what I thought that it would do for me internally. And so my solution to my perceived problem was just to double down on all those activities that I had previously mentioned. Amazing how much that seemed like a great idea at the time. In my junior year of college, I decided to move to Australia for 6 months to study overseas. For any of you out there, you have kids that are in college right now and they're talking about studying overseas, you can just play along with it. Sure. Yeah. Study. It was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life because I experienced what I would call a radical encounter with God while I was in Australia. Wasn't looking for that. And what took place was a couple things. One, I met a couple guys over there who became my closest friends, and they happened to be Jesus followers. And they were pretty fun guys. They could go out to a bar, have a few drinks, and go home. And meanwhile, I'd stay out doing the things they weren't doing. And then I also did some travel in various countries in Southeast Asia, the Pacific Rim, and of course, Australia. And I began to realize the world was a very big place and it didn't revolve around me and my 22-year-old ego, which was a very important lesson for me at that time in my life. Look, sometimes I still need to learn that lesson. So these guys, who were a lot of fun, kept trying to get me to come to their church service. And I was like, dude, no way. I didn't come to Australia to meet with God. And they wouldn't stop. Finally, I was like, whatever. I went. It was okay. It was this little Anglican church service where the pastor wore skateboarding shoes and skateboarding shorts, which I thought was kind of weird because I'd never seen anything like that. And I ended up going back a second time. I went a third time. The third time I went, this guy gets on the stage. He tells this story that in many ways outlined my life and my life choices to that point. And I remember distinctly as he was wrapping up this story, I experienced hearing God speak to me for the first time in my life. It was not an audible voice, but it was more clear than anything I'd ever heard a human being say. And that was a catalytic moment for me that led me to realize I basically had this visual kind of like highlight reel, or really more appropriately, a low light reel of the last 6 years of my life. And I realized that God let me do everything I wanted to do. I pretty much got everything that I wanted. He didn't mess up my plans. He didn't send me to jail, which I should have been there for, drunk driving, drug use. I think I told you before I was a drug dealer for about 3 days. I wasn't very good at it, but I certainly could have gotten arrested during that time. And I realized that I got everything I wanted, but at no point was I as happy or as satisfied as I was when I was Lambert, the Jesus freak. And so I made a decision right there. I remember what I did. I went up to the front. I got down on my knees. I looked up. I said, God, from this moment forward, I'm going to stop doing whatever you want me to stop doing. And I'm going to start doing whatever you want me to start doing. So a couple major transformations took place in my life. One, I immediately stopped getting drunk. Look, I still like some bourbon and cigars, but I don't get drunk. And I stopped using illegal substances. But what started happening in my life was actually a lot more inspiring. So prior to this experience, I loved my parents, my sister, my fraternity brothers, the girl I thought I was going to marry at the time. But I couldn't have cared less about people outside my little bubble. I wasn't a bully, but I was paying no attention to them, to anybody outside my little sphere. Immediately after this experience, and this was 2002, and continuing on to this day, I have been experiencing what I would call a radical sense of curiosity, where anyone that I would meet or do meet, I just want to know who they are, what makes them tick, what are they passionate about, what might they, if anything, be struggling with? Is there any way I can help? Okay. So I moved back to Indiana University for my senior year. Before I left IU, there wasn't a single Jesus follower or Christian in this entire fraternity of 180 guys. Before I got back, this had nothing to do with me. My three best friends in the frat also had these crazy encounters with God. Um, and so did my drug dealer, who was an atheist before I left. I got back. They're like, "What the heck, Lambert?" And I'm like, what the heck, guys?" And we got this Bible study going, and we started leading tons of dudes to Jesus. After like 3 or 4 weeks, we had 12 to 15 guys. I started thinking about my future. My plan was to go to law school and become a real estate developer to make a ton of money to fuel the lifestyle that I thought I wanted.
Hmm.
But after this transformation, I no longer wanted that money. And I just all of a sudden wanted to help people connect with God. And so I felt like God was calling me to be a pastor. So I canceled law school, moved out to LA, studied seminary to learn to become a pastor, eventually met the woman out there who became my wife. We felt led to come to Detroit and start a church. Before we did that, we did what most people do, and we moved to Africa for 9 months. And I lived in a mud hut in a Muslim village with no running water. And I became a community developer, which I knew nothing about, but I knew how to find out what people wanted and needed and help them get access to those resources. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over to you is that experience in Africa really radically reshaped my understanding of the person of Jesus that led me into the work that I'm doing now. And that was this. As I experienced living among very marginalized and oppressed peoples many were experiencing a lot of suffering, as I reread through the Bible, and in particular, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the stories about Jesus, I began to see very clearly that this dude spent the majority of his time with people who were the most marginalized and oppressed. The drunks, the lepers, the prostitutes, the untouchables. And his only criticisms were for the religious establishment and the religious leaders. And he had nothing but love to give and a lot of time with people who were experiencing this suffering. And I realized that that was what he was calling his followers to do. Not that we all need to move into a mud hut or even into the hood, but that led us not only to start a church that was trying to do those things, but eventually that inspired me to create this nonprofit, Life Remodeled, which very intentionally is not a religious organization, but my faith is what drives me to do everything that I do. And my faith is what shaped my worldview. And now I'm at this place, I'm 43 years of age, and I'm going to tell you, if I were to do anything else, if I were to go into the for-profit sector, and I got nothing but love for the for-profit sector, and God is working through people in all different industries all over the planet. Me personally, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I'd be miserable. I actually need the people that we are serving, people who are experiencing marginalization, oppression, suffering here in Detroit. I need them more than they need me. And I find so much joy and fulfillment in being with them that I can't not do this work.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to touch on a couple different points. One, going back to when you're 24, and for you it's God, or you think about from being an entrepreneur trying to figure out your life's path. I mean, I can only imagine you're like, I'm gonna go to law school, I'm gonna be this real estate developer, I'm gonna make all this cash and feel this lifestyle. Then like all of a sudden, like what an impactful like boom, you're like, nah, like that's not for me. But I mean, so for me, I want to just emphasize the importance of, really understanding what you really, really want. I think as an entrepreneur, once you can establish what you really, really want, like you're a really fascinating guy in the sense of a lot of people, they might have pushed that aside for 5 years, right? Or went through law school and did that, but you took action like right away. So then talking about going through to like, going to Africa in a mud hut, like I hear of that stuff. Like I don't have any personal experience around anything like that. Like I hear of things or mission trips or people doing these things. I personally have 5 kids, and sometimes I want to do something with them. So to get out of our bubble, right? I live in Novi, Northville, Michigan. We're very blessed and fortunate, but sometimes I'm like, man, I want you guys to get exposed to like what outside of these walls, what life looks like. So walk me through that process of making that decision and convincing, was it your girlfriend or wife at the time, that you're going to go to Africa for 9 months to do what?
Yeah. Wes, I've heard you share your story with me, and I love your story, and I'm extremely inspired by it. And I truly believe all of us are living very interesting stories. And there are these inflection points in our life, these you know divergent paths where we are given opportunities to make really big decisions. For me, as you can probably tell in the time that we've known each other, I'm just an all or nothing kind of guy. I really don't want to live any other way. If I believe in something, I'm in, and I make decisions. I evaluate those decisions. I learn from them and fail forward. Right. So when it came to my wife being convinced to move, to Africa, the good news is I knew who I had married. I had married someone who already had moved into very difficult life circumstances in Los Angeles. She worked as a sexual assault advocate with a lot of women in very vulnerable positions. And she also worked with drug addicts and alcoholics, people experiencing alcoholism. And she'd never done a drug in her life. She had no idea what that was even about, but she spoke the language of love. And so for me to convince her wasn't really something that I needed to do. Our hearts were very much aligned, and we got a vision for what we thought God was calling us to do, and we were both at a place in our life where we didn't want to do anything different than what we sensed God calling us to do, and that's how we make decisions in life. Is really trying to discern what is our Creator saying, and that's what we want to be about. And look, we get that wrong, from time to time. That's why I say we evaluate our decisions and pivot as necessary.
So this gets us to your creation of Life Remodeled. And again, I want to reiterate, 51 million into Detroit, 4 school buildings, 82,000 volunteers, beautified 2,300 blocks. You start Life Remodeled. What's that vision? Or like you now come to this place and you have this vision for Life Remodeled.
Mhm.
What's like the first step? Like, what do you do? How do you put it all together?
Our vision and strategy have evolved quite a bit since I launched Life Remodel with some buddies in 2010. And we were way over our skis then. And over the years, we've taken on projects so massive. One of the things that people have constantly told us is, you guys are crazy, right? And so we discovered one of our core values through that process of always find a way. We really have 3 core values that drive everything that we do: who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and why we do it. First, it's community first, which is this: we don't want to do things to communities or for communities. We only want to do the work we do with communities. And that's why it's so essential. And from the beginning, when we started, and all the way through today, and we've gotten better and better at this over the years, it's all about discovering the community's hopes, dreams, visions, and values before you ever come up with solutions. And I think that's true for entrepreneurs who are selling products or services, is truly understanding your clients. But what's at stake in the nonprofit sector is far greater than the sale of goods and services, right? And unfortunately, so much of nonprofit work is honestly really doing things to people or for people. And that is actually destructive in many ways, shapes, and form. And so it's hard to discover what the community wants. It takes a lot of intentionality. Always find a way. Is we surround ourselves with people. We hire people. We partner with people who, when they see a radical obstacle, they certainly don't just do the same thing that they just did that got them to that place. They innovate. They get vulnerable. They ask others to help. They get transparent with what the problems are. They take radical ownership of where they're struggling or failing, and then they push through. They find a solution, and usually that solution is all about who rather than how. It's about finding the right who's and aligning with the right who's, and together discovering the hows. And then our last core value is what we call bold humility. And these two things seem like a radical paradox, and they are. But we say that if a person's only bold, then they're a jerk. And if a person's only humble, then they're a doormat. And so we have sought after this value and living it out all day, every day. And you asked me about, how did you start your venture? And it was values based from the very beginning. Culture trumps strategy, culture eats strategy for breakfast all day long. Because we had that culture, we magnetized other like-minded, crazy people who were about that life, right? And who were so mission driven that people went to the ends of the earth to help us achieve our first project, which, by the way, what we used to do is we used to build houses in 6 days and give them away to low-income families for free, take the families through financial training, set them up with a free financial advisor, free clinical therapy for the family, and then we would invest in the surrounding community, and we'd mobilize 500 volunteers to beautify the surrounding neighborhood. Look, that was big stuff at that time. And now we're doing, way more than that because of culture. And ultimately, I'm going to give all the credit to God, and I believe God's all about relationships. And I have learned more and more as time goes by, it's more important than who is way more important than how. So I spend a lot of my time finding like-minded people, finding what they're passionate about. And then if their passions align with our mission, now I don't have to beg people to help us or help these poor people. I can help people achieve their values in the world by partnering with us.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, like you just had such a clear vision, and along the way, you're just finding your who's, people that can sort of buy into your vision, and you're kind of the gateway to so they can come along with you to serve your mission and vision. But I want to go back to, I look at, for me, it's tough. I look at anytime I go to Detroit or there's homeless, I get yelled at because most of the time quietly I'm slipping 20s, 50s. And it's just something I do. I've always done it. I don't do it for any glorification, but I like the fact that my kids see it, because it's like, hey, dad might be a hard head guy, but like he kind of cares. But like, I want to, in your situation of like, how do you, because me, it's like you have a heart of gold and you want to help everybody. Like, how do you pick that family for that house? Or how do you evolve from that, right? And how do you, as a nonprofit, I'm sure that there's just so much coming in all the time. Everybody you're gaining traction. Everybody's kind of coming to you like, Chris, Life Remodeled, take our project on, help us do this. You can do it. How do you manage through all that?
All the time. So, what you do, slipping 20s and slipping 50s, look, you got to do what you feel called to do. That wouldn't be what I would recommend in general as a great strategy. And we talk about that at another point. And Life Remodeled strategy has evolved radically to what we do now. And let me start with why we exist as Life Remodeled. We exist because we believe Detroiters have all the talent they need, but many don't have access to all the opportunities they deserve. And let me define lack of access to opportunities, okay? Right now, 88% of children in third grade in Detroit schools currently are not able to read at grade level at third grade. 30% of Detroiters can't access the health care they need. And Detroit residents' median household income is 50% less than suburban peers. So what do we do in response to that reality? We acquire large vacant school buildings. We repurpose these buildings into one-stop hubs of opportunity for entire families to thrive. We then fill these buildings with the very best and brightest nonprofits who are doing three things: educational youth programs to address the education crisis, providing essential health and wellness services to address the disparity in health and wellness. And we help Detroiters achieve economic self-sufficiency by finding the right workforce development programs that provide workforce education, workforce training, workforce opportunities, and get people in jobs that dramatically change their whole financial outcome. And we not only are filling these buildings with these organizations, And we have a fully financially self-sustaining model because we charge them costs. What it costs us to operate this building, that's what they pay. No markup, no developer fees, and that's what makes it very accessible. And we bring these programs to the community through experts, and then we help them collaborate to make far greater impact together than any of us could ever achieve alone. And that is the problem, is access to opportunity, and that is what we address. And we are really good as an organization, first and foremost, about finding out what a community wants and needs, building trust. And then we find the best organizations. We inspire them to move in, which is a big deal, because most organizations aren't going to move into the neighborhoods that we work in that are highly distressed, where there's high crime rates and so on and so forth. But that's where people live. They don't live downtown. And public transportation is a major problem in Detroit. You got to be where people are. And then we're really good at helping everybody play well together and achieve very strategic outcomes and impact numbers collaboratively through data, through determination, through clear goal setting and accountability. And whenever anybody asks us to do, work like, well, why don't you create a workforce development initiative? Our answer is no, because there's other programs out there that's what they were born to do. And we're just going to find them and we're going to bring them to the table. Or why don't you create health and wellness services? Same answer, right? So we know who we are and we know who we're not. And believe me, in the world of philanthropy, there's a lot of carrot dangling where maybe a grant comes out for any of those programs I just mentioned for workforce development. And we've been tempted to chase after that carrot, right? But that would take us off mission for who we are. And look, we're really good at what we do. What we do is very much needed. And what others are doing is just as important. And when we collaborate, oh my goodness, now real life change, real neighborhood revitalization that lasts is happening.
So this gets us to where you're at today, right? We talked a little bit about you're in the middle of a $14.7 million raise. Like what is that? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so we just acquired another vacant school building. The one we just bought was the old Dominican Catholic Girls High School at I-94 and Whittier, which most recently was a charter school called Winans Academy of Performing Arts. That closed last year. We bought the property at 7.5 acres. We're going to add a 26,000 square foot addition onto this building. When we're done with construction, it'll be just about 90,000 square feet. And we are already signing LOIs and leases with nonprofits that'll move in. But we raise the capital stack through philanthropy to be able to make this project a success, because this project would never work financially if we did it from a for-profit lens where we do a raise with a lot of debt financing that we then have to bake into the pro forma. And then we would have to charge lease rates that none of the nonprofits would be able to pay, right? And so by us raising the capital stack through philanthropy, we're also going after new market tax credits for about $2 million of that $14.7 million. And we've received some public dollar support. We just got $1 million through Department of Health and Human Services. But through that approach, we're then able to have a model where we can charge a lease rate that is strictly based on the operations of the building. And that allows us to be highly selective about which nonprofits can move in there, because we actually say no to every nonprofit that just wants a cool, sexy place to do administrative work. Mm-hmm. We say, now go to Tech Town, go to Bamboo, go to WeWork. Those are all amazing places and spaces. This place isn't about that. This place is about direct services in a neighborhood that are going to drastically change the outcome of the future of that community. And raising that kind of money, certainly is no joke. It's all done through relationships that we have built over the years of trust, of building upon, the $100,000 gifts that someone has given us showing the impact that we've been able to achieve with that $100,000 gift, turning that into $1 million gift for the next gift that they give, earning trust to where they introduce us to their friends who also have the philanthropic means to be able to make a project like this possible. And so we're in a really good place right now, but look, it's stressful, raising $14.7 million in a short period of time.
Yeah. I bet. I mean, there was a stat I looked at, and it's failing to come to my mind right now. But there was something that Life Remodeled was recognized in your industry or nonprofit world about. Let me back up.
Yeah.
I've had in my personal life or other entrepreneurs I've heard like, well, I don't know where that money goes, right?
Yeah.
Or I give it here because it's safe, or I just don't know what's going to happen with that. What is that in the nonprofit world that you guys are recognized for?
So there've been quite a few awards that we've won. You're probably talking about Crane's Best Managed Nonprofit.
There it is.
So we've been recognized for 2 straight years in a row as one of the best managed nonprofits in the region. And at the foundation of that entire determination is financial management and stewardship, right? We also have the highest possible ratings you can have on both Charity Navigator and GuideStar, which those are nationwide measurement systems that are measuring nonprofits all over the country. And we have no control over what rating they decide. And they have given us the highest ratings you can possibly have. And so delivering on impact is everything, right? Like I said, it's all about relationships, but you can have the most amazing relationships in the world, but once people start to give you money, if you don't actually produce the outcomes and impact that you all agreed upon would be achieved, and if you don't do it in a way that's truly stewarding resources well, people are going to stop giving to you, and the well's going to dry up. And so we're very committed to excellence, and that goes back to the foundation of achieving that excellence is all about the right people in the right seats, developing a team of one. And then we've created a strategic plan that's only 2 pages in length. That's another essential practice for us because it gives our entire team the ability to truly grasp exactly where we're going as an organization and how we're going to get there. And then they can get excited about it. And then we have a few tools that we put in place to ensure that we're actually operationalizing our strategic plan to the point where every team member throughout our entire organization sets 90-day quarterly priorities every 90 days that are the 3 to 7 most important things they've got to get done that quarter to stay on track for us to hit what we call our 10-year moonshot. And then we back that out to 3 years and 1 year and even 90 days. And we hold each other radically accountable. And we always know exactly where and when a ball drops when it does. And that's not so that we can throw our team members under the bus, but that's so that we're all driven by our why. We're all driven by the why of Detroiters have all the talent they need, but many don't have access to all the opportunities they deserve. So whenever any of us drops the ball, it's not a time for us to point fingers and blame. We're motivated by, hey, let's figure this out, right? And look, we don't do everything perfect. But I would say we certainly do things way better than the vast majority of nonprofits. And it's not a competition, which is why I've written this book that you mentioned earlier, Next Level Nonprofit. I want everything that we do to be open source. Anything that we've learned, which by the way, I have learned from so many great men and women in the business world that I would love to give shout outs to, that these are just principles that have been passed down for generations. Unfortunately, many nonprofits aren't living by these principles. And so we work very diligently to inspire other nonprofits, like put these principles into practice. Here's how you do it. We want you to succeed because ultimately that just leads to more people being served and being served more effectively. And we're about that happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask, I mean, is it sort of taboo in the nonprofit space? I mean, you approach everything from my perspective, very entrepreneurial to your book, Next Level Profit. Is this where, you found great success on your path, implementing that into your organization, getting the buy-in? You have this very, successful charging organization. Now, is the Next Level Nonprofit, like
Mhm.
open book, but do you actually engage and help other nonprofits like
Yeah.
out of your playbook? I mean, how I love your attitude and vision around like, hey, there's everybody has a place, that there's a big world out there. I love the abundance mindset with entrepreneurs, but are you like tactically getting in and showing your playbook and walking
Yeah.
them through to other nonprofits?
Yeah. So many of your listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with for profit organizational operating systems such as EOS, Scaling Up, Rockefeller Habits, the Four Disciplines of Execution, Pinnacle, the Great Game of Business.
Yep.
I could go on, and it seems like there's a new system developed every 6 months, and they're all fantastic, by the way. All of those systems, including my favorite one, EOS, which was created by Gino Wickman, who is a friend of mine, he's one of my heroes. Okay. All of those systems were created for profit businesses. None of them were created with nonprofit language, nonprofit understanding. One of the things that I've found is most nonprofit organizations are led by incredible people who have very little to no experience in the for-profit world, or at least in successful for-profit organizations. And a lot of them they don't know what they don't know. And they actually do stiff arm business language. So a lot of nonprofit leaders, they're not going to read Patrick Lencioni or Jim Collins or Michael Gerber or Kim Scott or Gino Wickman or Vern Harnish. They're not going to read these books because they label the business world as exploitative
Yep.
and just profit driven, which is such an oversimplification, and it's just dead wrong in so many cases, right? And so what we've done at Life Remodeled is, if you take those principles that are in all those systems I just mentioned that are all great, they're all sharing the same principles. Those are timeless, universal, essential principles. We have translated those principles into nonprofit language, used our own failures and successes as examples in this book, Next Level Nonprofit, and we coach organizations in this methodology. So, in the world of coaching, an implementation of like a great system, like any of the ones I've mentioned, typically a great implementer, or as Pinnacle would call them, guide, is going to cost you $50,000 to $80,000 for the first year, which is actually a very fair price for the services that you're getting. And I would recommend any of those companies for profit businesses. But nonprofits can't afford that, including our own. So we've broken that down. We only charge $20,000. And what that is we coach executive leadership teams to implement this entire system. And we make it accessible, we make it affordable, and we speak their language. And I'm going to tell you, though, man, it's a tough sell
Yeah.
because a lot of nonprofits just don't get it. They don't know what they don't know. And that's not a criticism. But what we do is, when I meet with somebody, I don't try to sell them on our system.
Mm-hmm.
I just ask them, first of all, what's going great in your organization? I listen. And what do you want to see more of that's going well? Okay. If you had a magic wand and you could change the biggest problem in your organization, what would you change? Then I start asking them about, I talk to the CEO, what are you really, really, really good at? And you really enjoy doing it. And they name those things. Okay. How much of your time are you spending doing just those things? And usually it's a very low percentage of the time.
Right.
Okay, what if you were able to get to a place where the majority of your time was spent on those things, and you could delegate these other tasks to people who would actually do them better than you? And then I asked them about their team. And this is where everybody starts to discover their real pain points, because the biggest pain points in every organization are people challenges, right? People issues. And tell me about your team. Do you have all the right people in all the right seats? Are you truly a team of one? Of course, they always think of problem scenarios. And what would your organization look like if you solved those? If those people that are giving you people challenges, what if you could coach them to where they were extremely top tier performers and they were team players? Or if they transitioned out of the organization and you filled those seats with the very best people and you became a team of one, what would be different about your organization? Through that conversation, people begin to come to their own conclusions of, okay, we need help.
Yeah.
We need help.
Well, what's great is, I mean, man, if you would take on some for-profit business, what you just said applies to
Yeah.
for-profit business too. Like you mentioned, EOS, Rockefeller Habits, some type of operating system is essential. But I get your pain point. But I think what's really inspiring for me is just your vision and just your, you know, to get other nonprofits better, the abundance mindset. Like I think that's amazing.
Mm.
How can other entrepreneurs or guys like myself, entrepreneurs, like get involved, right? And I think oftentimes I'll throw myself under the bus. Many times I've had, hey, like how can I help? Or people said, hey, bring your team, and it might have been through your organization or somebody else. Like get your team here for the day, and I'm just like, I feel like I should be doing more. I think with a guy like you, you're very inspirational. I like to attach my wagon or get behind other inspired entrepreneurs. But like,
Mhm.
what can a real entrepreneurial company do, or like
Mhm.
from your perspective, how can they get involved?
Well, I can help answer that question certainly for you because I know your passion and we've already talked about this. But for any of our listeners, if you're passionate about Detroit, the city, if you're passionate about Detroit neighborhoods, about children achieving better educational outcomes, people acquiring better jobs that drastically change the future of their economic landscape, people getting access to great health and wellness services, I can help you with that, right? One of the ways you can get involved is every year we have a 6-day project where we mobilize 5,000 volunteers over 6 straight days, and we beautify 2 square miles surrounding our opportunity hubs. So we're going to be on the east side for the next few years in the Denby community, right there surrounding that new opportunity hub that we're creating as we speak. That project will take place the last full week in September. You can find all the info about it on our website. You can bring your whole company. Like GM will be bringing 1,000
Wow.
volunteers for one full day next year. One year they brought 3,700
Wow.
volunteers for us. So there's no group too small or too big. We can handle your group, and we'll give them an experience where they're going to do work that they will see the impact of their labor within a matter of 4 hours. Unfortunately, some of the properties that they'll work on are so covered by brush, you literally don't even know there's a house there until you start taking down all that brush. And this work has been proven to reduce crime in the surrounding community. We have the data to prove it from the Detroit Police Department. They came to us and they said, look at these statistics in these communities you've worked in, right? So that's an easy way for companies to get engaged. If you want to use your financial resources to make tangible, lasting impact in Detroit neighborhoods, I can absolutely help steward your resources to those goals and those ends. And if, please feel free to reach out to me if that's something you want to talk about. We do have a really cool event coming up in May. It's called Prom Remodeled. It's our annual fundraiser. We just did our first one last year. Okay. It's an opportunity for adults to relive or redo prom. And it's crazy. We had 1,000 people. We raised a
Wow.
$500,000. Our entertainment last year was Montel Jordan. Okay. This is how we do it. And the Gin Blossoms.
Nice.
Anywhere you go. All right. I'm going to stop singing. Our entertainment this year, we got Rob Bass,
Nice.
It Takes Two to Make a Thing Go Right, Tone Loc, Wild Thing, and Tretch of Naughty by Nature. Okay, OPP, Hip Hop Array, Feel Me Flow. This thing is going to be crazy, but we're just going to have a great time together, raising support for neighborhood revitalization that lasts. So if you're interested in our prom, you can go to our website and find out more on that too.
So I got to ask a stupid question. So I
Okay.
look at 14.7 million as a
Yeah.
raise.
Yeah.
You know, what if somebody's got $20 or $50?
Yep.
You know, and I'm like, it won't even move the needle. Like that's a big number. Like what is a, if you look at a business or an individual, like what amount isn't too small, or how do you overcome that? Hey, I only have $10 or $100, or hey, I've already there's other people and entrepreneurs that commit to other causes, but like what's a good way for somebody to get started?
Well, obviously, if you have 1,000 people giving $20, that's $20,000. If you have 10,000 people giving $20, that's $200,000. It all adds up. So this isn't a game where anybody's saying you have to give this or you have to give that. My question to people who are looking at getting engaged in something meaningful like this is, What do you want to accomplish? Right? And how big of impact do you want to make? I can help you do that. And show you exactly how it's going to happen. And first, I'd show you the proof of where it's happened. So I'm in our Durfee Innovation Society right now, which is 143,000 square foot former elementary middle school that's fully occupied with 40 organizations serving 28,000 people now a year. And recently, Gallup Research did a survey in the city of Detroit where they surveyed 12,000 Detroiters all over the city. And I didn't even know this study was happening until it was done. And they were asking Detroiters, surveying them about their perception of their ability to thrive based on the specific neighborhood they lived in. There were 6 criteria that they asked Detroiters. Number 1, do you believe you can experience economic mobility in your neighborhood? Number 2, do you have access to quality educational opportunities? 3, quality workforce development initiatives. 4, quality health care. 5, what's the strength of your police community relations, which, by the way, the majority of the public police community relations activities happen right here in our building in this local precinct. 6, how strong is your community collaboration? Then when this study was done, they released the results at the Mackinac Policy Conference, and they put on the screen, here's the 3 neighborhoods in Detroit that scored the highest on their perception of their ability to thrive. Number 1, Indian Village. Okay, no surprise there. That's a great neighborhood. Number 2, they put on the screen, Durfee Community. Here's what's crazy about that. That's the neighborhood we just created, the Durfee Innovation Society. That community didn't have a name before we got here. The city called it Dexter Linwood because that's just 2 streets. And there's a lot of neighborhoods in Detroit that don't have a name. But ever since we created this Durfee Innovation Society, which, by the way, the youth named this place, people started calling this community Durfee after this place. Also, when we got here, 80% of people who lived within 4.5 square miles lived at or below the poverty line. If that study by Gallup would have been done 6 years ago, this neighborhood would have scored right toward the bottom in the entire city. And things have changed because the opportunity is real. Community members believe in that opportunity. There's trust. And if anybody wants to come here and see it, it is one of those things you truly got to see to fully understand. Come on, we'll show it to you. And if you want to be a part of scaling that and replicating that now to the east side of Detroit in a neighborhood that has even more opportunity gaps than the neighborhood we're in right now, let's go.
No, that's great, Chris. I mean, you're an inspiration to me personally, and I know a lot of other entrepreneurs. How can people connect with you? Where can they most easily find you?
Yeah, check out our website, Life Remodeled, LIFEREMODELED.org. If you want to learn more about prom, you can actually just type in promremodeled.org or just go to the Life Remodeled website. You can learn more about the 6-day project there. You can donate. You can find my contact information there. And, my focus right now is on this capital campaign. So I'm looking for individuals that want to make a very, very significant level of impact. And I can help you do that. And I'm also working on scaling next level nonprofit all around the country.
Yeah, well, thank you. I to anybody that wants to reach out to Chris, I recommend it. You're a wealth of inspiration. I really appreciate what you do. It's really inspiring to me. I could talk to you all day, but I want to let you get back to what you're doing in Detroit and moving mountains. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
My brother, thank you for your time and what you do and how you're doing it. I'm inspired by you.
Thanks. If you learned something today, please share this. If you know any nonprofits, please share this episode with them. This is extremely important. Chris Lambert, thanks again, man. I appreciate it. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.